Sir William CO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rise to take a call on this particular bill and acknowledge my colleagues before me, Dr. Rajan Prasad and Jacinda Ardern, who, whilst we're not members of the Justice and Electoral Committee that has overheard this bill and the submissions to it, have had quite a lot to do with the Social Services Committee, in where we've had the opportunity to visit the surrounding organisations dealing with a lot of these issues here in the Wellington region. I note that the national-led government prides itself on its record in this area, claiming this is another bill to protect victims of domestic violence. And I have to say, with the greatest respect to this House, that this bill will not solve domestic violence. This bill will not protect families and children. People need to do that. But I think the bill is an important part of it, but I don't think, as we've repeated time and time again, that this bill actually goes far enough to address the issues. I also want to say, Mr. Chair, that there's been considerable debate around this in the up and down the country, and note that there always seems to be a tendency to blame one sector of society over this issue. I recall the Minister of Social Development at one point in time appear to point the finger at Māori. Others will point the finger at Pacific communities. And I want to re-emphasise the point that I've made in numerous speeches in this House. Domestic violence, family violence, violence and abuse against children is not a Pacific or a Māori issue. It is an issue for this country. And I think until we are able to address it from that perspective and look at it, that it is good for New Zealand and good for the future of this country, we're merely just tinkering around the edges, as one of the famous lines by this particular government. And so I think that point is very, very important for us to accept, that no one party is going to be able to address this particular issue. The parties need to look critically that the bills do not in themselves solve this problem. But, and I'm hoping that, and stressing that the Minister and this government will at least consider the supplementary order papers that have been put up by the opposition, but consider also the work that the Labour Party has done in this particular regard. And I refer, of course, to the Child and Family Protection, to the Labour's Domestic Violence Reform Bill, which is at the moment languishing at the bottom of the order paper. That bill, sir, changes the definition of child. Okay. In the Domestic Violence Act. And it raises the issue, sir, that we heard from submitters, that is an issue, the under the age of 18, in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, needs to be considered. And the submissions made by the people of this, that made submission on this bill, need to be considered in terms of the age. That is a factor, sir, that was raised consistently by submitters, and particularly organisations dealing with our young people. I think the other point that is important is a provision requiring any judge who declines a without notice application for a protection order to provide written reasons for declining the application, enabling the applicant to decide whether to proceed on notice. National's bill does not include a similar provision. Labour's proposal, Mr. Chair, was to make provisions for applicants to be able to attend information sessions, which would provide advice on making effective use of protection orders and providing advice on any social assistance that may be available. The government bill does not provide the court with the power to direct attendance to an addiction assessment and treatment program. And I want to give the example of a local organisation down the road from here, Mr. Speaker, Ms. Chair, young people, Ms. Chair,
Sir William CO.
young people from the age of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, young people, sir, that were forced by the abuse by people who were supposedly their care, their guardian, supposedly people who loved them, forced, and some even prior to being born, to become addicted to some of the bad habits of some of their parents. And so there was a real need, sir, for provision in the bill to give, with the power to direct attendance to an addiction assessment and treatment program. If a person is going to be addicted to whatever drugs, sir, unless they are treated, they remain addicted, as I understand it, for a very long time. And so there is that particular point there needs to be addressed. And we know, sir, from what we see in the papers, particularly in certain parts of the country, that the drug trade is a trade that we have to be concerned about because there are people out there in the community selling it even to young kids, young as 8 years old. Okay, and so Labour's bill also contained better protections and provisions around applications for discharge of protection orders and allowed the court to order reports if necessary. I suppose the point, sir, is that whilst this government might claim that this bill is going to provide the silver bullet, if you like, to the issue, we have to say, yep, we're supporting it on the basis that we recognise this is a serious problem and it is a problem that we have to collectively try and address. But we maintain, Mr. Chair, that this bill does not go far enough. And again, if this government is serious about addressing that bill and is not playing politics, not trying to window dress and lull people into thinking that by putting up all these bills things are going to be fixed, because they're not going to be fixed, sir, simply by putting up laws. If they're serious about addressing the issue, then they would take seriously the submissions made by the opposition, the supplementary order papers that our side are putting up. Mr. Simon Power says that he intends to progress the remaining provisions of the Domestic Violence Reform Bill, but we would like to know when this is going to happen. He has not yet set a date. He's also said that he lacks resources to be able to go further. Well, you would think, Mr. Speaker, that if this issue of domestic violence, the protection of children and their families, was serious, this government should have placed this as a priority rather than giving huge tax cuts to their friends and to that small group of the elites that they are pandering to.
Order.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So for Labour, tackling the evil of family violence was a genuine priority. The Domestic Violence Reform Bill included the on-the-spot protection orders that have since been implemented. The principle behind this Labour initiative was to make the family safe as the first priority. That should be the first priority. Families. That should be the first priority. Children. That should be the first priority, Mr. Chair. And I think if this government were ever to get it into their thinking, that is the priority. Families, young and old, families up and down the countryside, families in their diverse nature as they are today, then I think we can be a better nation for it. But I don't believe, and I have to say I don't believe, and many people are now seeing this government for what they really are in terms of attempting to make it look as if they are genuinely concerned, but on the one hand saying something that might be positive, but on the other hand the actions just do not align. And in this case, when they say that this bill is going to address domestic violence, protect children and their families, their actions actually speak something very, very different when they're giving away so much of taxpayer funding to a small select group of society that of course are their friends and